Thank you for auditing Professor Skye's Record Review, the only first listen new music review show, which used to be hosted by a French professor immediately after going to the gym, but now is done at his house, or outside of his house. I can't go inside right now because my family is everywhere, which is a good thing. But today I'm going to be out here in the oddly lit confines of my underporch to discuss the new album by Pearl Jam called Gigaton. Now I want to talk to you, as you can tell from the thumbnail, the thesis of this video is that Pearl Jam is Neil Young. Before I get there, I want to tell you a little bit about my history with them and how I reached there. A lot of times my videos get mostly viewed by super fans of the group. Recently my video on Morrissey got a lot of interesting response. So I imagine that some of the viewers of this are going to be Pearl Jam super fans. So let me give you both my bona fides and the reason why you should ignore me completely. You see, when it comes to being a hipster, I have never been a bigger hipster than I was with Pearl Jam. I want to show you a picture of a young Professor Skye. You see me right down there? You see that with my brother's there? They're in my Red Hot Chili Peppers t-shirt. Do you know where I got that shirt? I got that shirt at a concert from November 1991. Long time ago. It was in Boston. Actually, a friend of mine, he counterfeited the ticket and erased the seat number and wrote floor so I could get into the floor. And I went to the show to see the Red Hot Chili Peppers, who at the time were not what they would become. And I was all excited. And I was 14 years old, right? So I wanted to see all the opening acts. The first band was some band I had maybe heard of once, Smashing Pumpkins. They hadn't released any big singles yet. They blew my mind. I might get these orders mixed up. It might be the other way around. But then the second band was a band I'd completely never heard of. And so I'm sitting there waiting for the punk-funk gods of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, folding my arms, when Pearl Jam comes on. And it was one of the most transformational experiences I've ever had. I could not believe how good this band was. I had never heard of them. Their album, I believe, had just come out. And my friends and I were so shocked and amazed by this performance. Eddie Vedder jumped into the crowd and everything. Actually, later, Rolling Stone would rate it one of the 5 best concerts of the entire decade. And I just went there because I was lucky. But we were so amazed that my friend Brad went to Newbury Comics record store in Harvard Square, and he bought 10 on cassette. And I played it for anyone who would listen. I played it for one of my best friends, Jonathan, who only liked stuff that was popular. And he's like, I don't like this. It's too weird. We tried to play it for everybody. Some people liked it, some people didn't. Nothing. No response. Nobody cared. Until a half a year later, the second half of 1992, is when Pearl Jam became Pearl Jam. Alive, the video came out on MTV, and they became the new gods of grunge. So that was a weird experience for me because, here I was the super cool guy, and within a year, the band that I would fight against at Battle of the Bands, the popular band who would just play Metallica and whatever the most popular hits were, they were playing Pearl Jam songs now. It used to be me, and now it's them. So I felt a sense of loss, but I didn't give up on them yet, I bought Versus, and I liked it. My other friends who were a little bit more into technically proficient rock and roll liked it more than I did. Eventually Vitalogy came out, and I loved it. I thought, this is great. This is where I want them to go. I'm super excited. This is awesome. My favorite song was that Bugs song, a super weird accordion track. I liked the direction they were going. But then I basically stopped buying Pearl Jam albums. I don't know why. I think maybe the voice got to me. Maybe I just thought that they were boring. I never hated them, but I never found them that interesting. The next thing I would purchase, and I would listen to, was their work with Neil Young. So they played on Neil Young's album Mirrorball, which is one of Neil Young's worst albums of that decade, but the 90s are probably his best decade, so it's still a great album. And then Merkin Ball, which was the Pearl Jam follow-up. And so that's where I left Pearl Jam. I just left them there. I admired that they rejected MTV. I admired that they took down Ticketmaster. And I watched with distant glee as they maintained a huge status of just megastars who could sell out Fenway Park without having to play the game. One of my best friends and the co-host of my Star Wars podcast, Steve, it turns out he's a mega fan. And it's funny because he was only 7 years old when I went to that concert. you know? And he like buys all their concerts and sees them 10 times. And I remember just having to say to him at one point, you know, like, I'm sorry, Steve, they're really rewarding for people that love them. But if you don't love them, you just sort of have a passive appreciation, respect, but a kind of mystification. And all of this came together for me to realize when listening to this album that the way he feels about Pearl Jam and the way you, if you're one of these Pearl Jam superfans, feel about Pearl Jam is the way that I, a Neil Young superfan, feel about Neil Young. Not only do they have a similar approach in different ways, but I think you could really see Pearl Jam being to the 90s what Neil Young was to the 60s. I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to do the most internet thing possible. I'm going to give you the top 10 reasons, not the top 10, just 10 different reasons why I am saying Neil Young is Pearl Jam and Pearl Jam is Neil Young. Number one, most obviously, is the fact that their rejection of commercial success, their refusal to sell out, makes them more popular. Now, Neil Young, if you don't know, in the early 80s, completely threw away the Neil Young playbook. He released albums working with Devo, he made albums that were electronica, he made a 50s album, he did all this stuff to the point where his record company, Geffen, sued him. They sued him. They said, this is breach of contract. We want Neil Young, not Neil Young. Neil Young, not Neil Young, okay? But Neil Young was an innovator, he's an artist, and that's why he, basically alone amongst all the old hippie giants, survived the 80s without releasing a crap album or having his music go down the drain. Stay tuned, I'm going to do a review of one of his albums from the 80s in the next month or so. And in the similar way, Pearl Jam, you would think, saying no to MTV, refusing to have their tickets sold to the #1 ticket seller, would have them go down, but not. They didn't sell out. And because of that, we have the number 2 reason they're similar, and that's the fervor and the fidelity of their fans. One of my favorite stories about Bruce Springsteen was back in the 90s, before Bruce had his renaissance. There was an interview where he talked about Neil Young fans, and he just sort of said with despair that like he could release an album of crickets chirping and all of his fans would buy it. And he was right. I mean, Neil Young released an album called Arc or Weld, one of the two, and it was just a live album of distortion. I have it. It's upstairs. I don't listen to it, but it's good. I'm glad that he made it. I think in a way you can sort of see a similar thing with Pearl Jam, where like they do what they do and their fans completely follow them and completely love them. And in a way too, you know, like Neil's always compared to Bruce, but Neil's so much cooler than Bruce. Pearl Jam is always compared to Nirvana. Now I prefer Nirvana's music, but you actually think about who really did it, who really stood up to the man, who really showed the world what Generation X was all about. It's not putting a shotgun in your head and blowing your head off. It's like surviving and thriving without selling out. So in a similar way, you know, that I think that even just this having this counterplay between Nirvana and Pearl Jam works quite well. Number 3 reason Pearl Jam is Neil Young. They are both people who don't like them, respect them. I have met very few people who say, I hate Neil Young, or I hate Pearl Jam. If someone says, I hate Neil Young, or I hate Pearl Jam, you sort of have to not take them seriously as people. You just can't. Like, whatever you feel about their music, you have to respect them. This is very different than most other bands, where when you hate them, you can just hate them. I apologize for my nose getting redder. It is a little bit chilly out here, even though I'm wearing my 3-piece Buster Brown suit. Hey, someone commented on my cardigan the other day, said it was an obnoxious cardigan. What do you think of this suit? Is this obnoxious for you? Morrissey fan, 1982? All right. Another thing that really brings them together, and I think this is part of their charm for their fans, is their music is an amazing mixture of earnestness and kind of goofiness. Like earnestness that goes to the point of being goofy, where they mean what they say so much, but they're also not afraid to kind of take a step back and make fun of themselves. That complicated interplay between sort of irony and earnestness is not unique to these two bands, but it's a trait that they both share. And by the way, I am going to review the album soon. I like it. But let me just get through my list. Number 5, similarity. They're both probably too political and not subtle enough. When they make political statements, it is not with a soft hand. It is blunt. It's a little bit obnoxious. When Neil Young does it, I kind of like it. When Pearl Jam does it, I kind of don't. Number 6, they both have kind of quasi-shamanistic West Coast BS vibes to them. Especially on this album, it's like 3 or 4 songs where it's just sort of like, dude, do you believe in astrology? And like Neil Young, it's like some of his lyrics about like mystical searches and his Native American mumbo jumbo. Actually, mumbo jumbo is a racist term against Haitians. I'm not going to use that term anymore. Sort of like weird, fake, like quasi-religious, very West Coast approach. Number 7, they both write songs about loving vinyl records. They love vinyl records. Number 8, this is probably the main one, actually, in terms of the listening experience. The voice is the litmus. Like, if you like Neil Young's voice, you have a chance of loving Neil Young. If you don't, no hope. Eddie Vedder, if you like his voice, you have a chance of liking it. This is what happened to me. After 3 albums, I just got tired of his voice. Maybe it's because the 90s were over and the Mouse Rat style, you know, Mouse Rat, Chris Pratt's band from Parks and Rec. Like, I just realized that, like, that voice, if you can hear and not get annoyed, it's just like listening to and not getting annoyed. I don't know how I'm not annoyed by Neil Young. I don't know how you're not annoyed by Eddie Vedder. That's why we're all together. Number 9, both bands stand by, or both acts, stand by the guitar solo. Do you know how few guitar solos I've heard in listening to like thousands of albums? Like, you just don't hear guitar solos anymore. And thanks to Pearl Jam and Neil Young, that kind of like super rock and roll guitar solo stays. And then number 10, and this is going to lead into my review of the album, they both require repeat listenings to their new albums. I don't listen to a Neil Young album more than twice on its first release. I go back to it like 2 or 3 years later. Like an album from the 90s, Broken Arrow, one of his top 5 albums. I hated it the first couple times I listened to it. But it's not the same way that you have to re-listen to like Kid A, you know, by Radiohead. It's not like the way you have to re-listen to Kanye. It's not that you're going to listen, that they have shifted so radically. Oh my God, those birds are fighting. It's kind of a nice noise though. I'm going to leave it in. They are really fighting though. I don't know what they're fighting about. What do birds fight about? Nests? Anyways, it's not like Kid A or Kanye, where you have to listen because these are these great geniuses who are taking you on a new quest, right? It's actually that you have to listen because there's subtlety there, and there's a certain amount that the familiarity brings to the music. Broken Arrow by Neil Young is a perfect example, and this album, Gigaton, is a great example. If you re-listen to it, a lot of things that you find bland, you discover the textures, and you discover it's an amazingly well-constructed album. One of the benefits of this non-gym, you know, I usually listen to the album once at the gym and then review it. I'm now actually listening for a couple days, like while I cook, while I grade. And so I was able to really get a sense of where they're going with this. I want to go back to my friend and co-host, Steve. He's a big fan of John Williams' music, as am I. But he's a great defender of John Williams' music from the last 3 movies. And this is a similar thing, where a lot of times it all kind of sounds the same, or it sounds like old themes, but you have to really listen to it carefully, listen to it multiple times. He's doing John Williams things, but when you listen more carefully, you start to understand how it's a richer experience. So maybe I should say Pearl Jam is John Williams. No, that's too much. Okay, 15 minutes in, I haven't even talked to you about the album, but I think that's an interesting idea. Pearl Jam is Neil Young, or Pearl Jam is the 90s Neil Young. Most importantly, they're in their 3rd decade of making music, and thank God it's still vital, it's still important, it's not rote, it's not just cranking something out. Everything they release is important. And I think everything they release for their fans has to be a great and wonderful event. Before I get to the album, I keep teasing you guys. Maybe you don't care. They're not exactly the same. The biggest difference is that Pearl Jam is a band. it's really a band. It's not just Eddie Vedder and Crazy Horse. Like, this album is only maybe half written by Eddie Vedder. The other members, to varying degrees of success, get cracks at writing. A lot of the songs are given credit to all of them. And this sort of collective spirit, I think, really distances itself from Neil Young, who's very individualistic. Even though he talks about peace and love and hippiness and stuff like that, Billy Talbot and Ralph Molina, I don't think, ever get any songwriting credits. Ralph Molina, by the way, one of my favorite. He's just the best. Okay. And also, Pearl Jam is not quite as experimental, right? This album is good, but it sounds like a Pearl Jam album. If you played this for me after I heard Verses for the first time, I'd go, yeah, this makes sense. If you played it for me after Vitalogy, I'd be like, this is kind of a step back. I was hoping they'd get more experimental. So that's sort of a difference. So I'll go track by track. If you're not interested, don't watch. Why do I have to tell you that? You know that. So it starts off with a track called Whoever Said. And the one thing about Pearl Jam is they are not here to save rock and roll, but they are here to make rock and roll. Almost every track on this album is just rock and roll. You know, this has a great bridge breakdown, a cool kind of like fake out punk ending, lots of nice different parts. Again, the more I listen to it, the richer it gets. My suggestion, I'm not going to play it for you because you know what Pearl Jam sounds like. Listen to the song Whoever Said twice, back to back. See how you feel about it. See if maybe you actually like it more than you think. But you have to listen twice. Give it that chance. Super Blood Wolf Moon, very catchy chorus, good energy. I like it when Eddie Vedder is a little bit more breathy, as he is here, as opposed to a little more like ha. I like it like this. A great guitar solo. Just so many great guitar solos. And hey, I'm not a super fan. Which of the two guitarists does most of the solos? Is it Gossard or is McCready the bassist? Yeah, or McCready. Which one does these solos? If you're a super fan, can you tell which one is playing which solo? Because like if you're a Rolling Stones super fan, you know when Mick Taylor does a solo or Keith Richards does, right? I'm interested. Song Dance of the Clairvoyance is wonderful. It provides some variation on the album. It's got kind of a funk feel, kind of funk guitar lines. Kind of funky like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Not really. Not funky like them. Very layered vocals, quite nice. I really enjoyed it. Actually, at times it reminded me of Talking Heads or David Byrne, the way that he was singing, the way Eddie Vedder was going. Kind of that sort of overly intellectualized yelling. Quick Escape. Nice variation, some sound effects. Has nice kind of John Bonham way behind the rhythm drum beat, which is quite nice, and really good like clean guitar lines, which is nice. Then the album takes kind of a dip, at least in my opinion. The song All Right is atmospheric, but it's the first of the Jeff Ament songs. I think it's great that everybody gets a crack at writing songs on this album and producing it. And my prediction is, if you're a Pearl Jam fan, you need this because you need the band to stay together. Like the best rock and roll bands, each member is essential. You couldn't just fire Jeff Ament and hire some other bass player and have them do what they're doing. So whatever it is that keeps this band alive, and I'm sure in concert they're as good now as they were in 1991. I should see them again. I should. I mean, not that there's concerts anymore. But if there were, I'll try and see them again. And I'll give a review to you. But I don't know. This is a skipper. I just skipped this one the second time listening. Not so great. 7 O'Clock actually sounds like a Bruce Springsteen song. He's in kind of his inspirational mode. That kind of like shamanistic stuff I was saying. It's not bad. It has kind of a Led Zeppelin-y keyboard usage at the end. Like the keyboard usage sounds the way that keyboards sounded in the 70s when artists were just figuring out how to use it. It's also started to rain, so if you hear that sound, that's why the birds left. I guess they're eating worms. By the worms. Never Destination. I don't know. The second time I listened, I kind of loved it. So maybe Steve's right. I think I kind of love this song. But oh, the first time I listened to it, it is so on the nose. It's such a painful, on the nose kind of political song about Trump. It's just like, but there's some nice bass in the bridge. And the second time I listened to it, Eddie Vedder's yelling, which I usually find just terrible, I actually kind of liked. So I don't know. Hey, if there are real Pearl Jam fans watching this, what is your take on Never Destination? Is this like a classic? I can't tell. Take the Long Way. Okay, so this was a mystery to me because this is a song that's not in 4/4 timing. I don't know what it's in, 11/8, whatever. You can put that in the comments too, I don't care. But like, I have a problem with songs not written in 4/4. It usually feels as though it's someone saying, hey, I'm gonna write a song not in 4/4. And then that's how it sounds. So then I read the credits and it turns out it's written by the drummer. And I just find that just delightful. Just the drummer's just like working on his like cool funky beats and then he does that. So it feels to me like they just made a song. The drummer just had a drum beat and an idea and they just let him do it. And again, this is great. Keep the band happy. There's enough great Eddie Vedder written songs on here, I think, to bolster the less great songs written by the others. Okay? All right. Buckle Up is great. And this is not written by Eddie Vedder. This might even be my favorite song on the album. This is nice because Eddie goes into a softer voice as opposed to, oh, it's a little bit more of that whispery. Probably the best lyrics on the album. I think it's probably about someone's mom dying. It's kind of about like sponge baths, kind of weird thematics like that. But it's really nice atmosphere. In the beginning, I thought it was going into Dave Matthews territory, which is a definite no-no, Daffy. But then when the vocals come in, it kind of saves it. It's really quite a nice track. Comes and Goes is another very earnest song. This is the song where I made the great realization that this could have come off of Comes a Time by Neil Young. This is a very Neil Young style song, acoustic guitar, someone singing. It's very Neil Young, except it's got the mouse rat vocals leading up to the chorus. Comes and goes. But great lyrics, just an acoustic guitar. It's a nice reminder of what a good songwriter Eddie Vedder really is. Retrograde, this might be an actually astrological song. I'm glad Jeff Ament's in the band, but he's probably the one that's writing the worst songs on this album. That might be the commonly received opinion, but I don't know. And then the last track, River Cross, he's in his full inspirational, like shamanistic mode. Is it cringy? This is one of the great similarities between Neil Young and Pearl Jam. One man's cringe is another man's, oh yeah. I don't know. I found it a great combination between awesome, inspiring, and cringy. So there you go. There's the full album, Gigaton by Pearl Jam. Very happy to re-listen to it. Very happy to force myself to get back to a band which taught me a lot about rock and roll and live performance, and that I stopped listening to for very vague and ill-formed reasons. So, hey, if I stopped listening after Vitalogy, Pearl Jam fans, what should I listen to next? No Code? The one with the hand? Some other one? All right, until next time, I think I'm gonna review that Bob Dylan song because that seems interesting, but I'm cold as hell. I'm not gonna take it anymore. There's the camera.